Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we are very excited to have you along. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. I noticed quite a number of people have been writing comment. That's fine. Said, oh, you want me to comment? So they just write comment. Reminds me of the story of where this fellow was on the witness stand and the lawyer says, I want to remind you that all of your answers have to be oral. What is your name? Oral. Where do you live? Oral. What do you do? Oral. So if you just write share, it doesn't matter. They're not reading the comments to decide what they're saying. So therefore, the people who still every now and then I get comments on my Tuvia Singer video, still commenting on why do I keep talking. That's fine. It pushes up the numbers. I don't know how it works exactly, but it's technology, you know. Everything's taking over. Anyway, and we have a sponsor this week, sponsored by Frisch Power Washing. Tired of a dirty car but no time to hit the car wash? We've got the solution that comes right to your driveway. Introducing Frisch Power Washing, your local Flatbush pressure washing pros, giving your car that fresh, sparkling, clean look without you lifting a finger. I like this already. When are you coming to Israel? I hate going to the car wash. I hate waiting online in the car wash. You know, I told this story years ago when I had to go to the car wash, and it was like 150 degrees outside. It was just like unbelievable. And you're waiting online, so of course your air conditioning is not working because you're not running the car. And somebody cut into the line. And the guy behind him was like, it's okay. And the people running the car wash said, no, you can't cut in. And he says, no, I'm here already. And he would not leave, and they would not wash any more cars. And everyone just stood there for a half an hour in the blazing heat. And I said, I can't believe this. If I could have just called power washing to come to my house and do my car. Cars just $30. SUV only $45 if you have an SUV. Yeah, I can't really drive an SUV because it's really meant for younger people. I can't climb up into an SUV. I like to have a nice low car, and I could just sort of like slide over into. But that's not all. With Frisch, we also power wash your driveways, sidewalks, and awnings. Price on request. From your car to your curb, we've got you covered. We use powerful, eco-friendly detergents. That's an important thing because I remember seeing this picture in the 1960s where they had whole lakes and rivers that were just filled with suds. So you want something that's going to be eco-friendly. I grew up in Long Island, and it turned out that all of the fertilizers they were using seeped into the water table, and that's why all of us from Long Island turned out the way that we did. Anyway, detergents and high-pressure washing to blast away dirt and grime, making everything look fresh, and brand new. Did you get that one? Fresh, and fresh. Call Frisch Power Washing today at 917-692-2016. That's 917-692-2016. We come to you, servicing the Flatbush area. Your car, driveway, and more have never looked this fresh and clean. Wow. I have to tell you, I did not see this ad beforehand, but I am usually careful to only have advertisers with things that I myself would use. And yeah, I would use this. And when you're done with that, I'll have you come in and do my kids. But anyway, just kidding there. Okay. So Frisch Power Washing, yeah, which of course is particularly appropriate. Because even people who are not so careful about washing their cars, and there's an old vort, I don't know which mashgiach it was who said it, but it's an old mashgiach vort. They say, you ever notice who shows up at the car wash? It's not the really filthy cars. It's cars that are a little dirty. The really filthy ones don't bother going. Yeah. So it's the same thing when it comes to Musa Shmuz. Who shows up? The people are already working on themselves and are already growing and changing. And they're the ones who are willing to listen to the message. When I used to run NCSY, and I would sometimes be asked to deliver the sermon from the pulpit. So I would talk about the problems of assimilation and intermarriage and how we're working so hard to try to counter these. And often people would say to me, why are you telling us for it? We're in Shul. I said, well, who am I going to talk to? I have nobody else to talk to. So I got to talk to the people who show up, So normally the people who go to the car wash are the people whose cars are already clean and they want to keep them clean, as opposed to those really filthy caked on ones. Yeah. However, before Pesach, almost everybody cleans their car. Now, I understand going outside and vacuuming the inside of your car, especially if you have children, because there's chametz all over the place, cookies and things like that. So you want to find a good place. Well, why do you clean the outside of your car? You're getting ready for Pesach. You clean everything. Yeah. People wash their windows before Pesach. I've never seen a gluska yofa, right? A little pastry stuck onto your window. I shouldn't say never, but it's seldom that you do. So why are people cleaning their windows? Because, as somebody has said many times, don't confuse spring cleaning with Pesach cleaning. They're not the same thing. And I said this over in a shir once, and a lady said to me, yeah, but why wouldn't I do spring cleaning at the same time I'm doing Pesach cleaning? I have to clean this anyway, so I'm not going to clean it also, just to get it clean, even if it's not a problem of chametz. And I thought, yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Yes, do your spring cleaning. So we clean the outside of the car, even though, it's the inside of the car that's halachically a problem. But we want everything to be clean for Pesach. So I realized that this podcast is going to be coming out just before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's mamish almost Pesach. Wow. Time flies whether you're having fun or not at my age. Time just flies. Yeah. So that was a joke. It's an old joke, but I heard it from my good friend Chaim Rose of Shalom many years ago. He liked these kind of puns, and I chazer it over because it's so clever. Time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. So it's a very clever joke because in one case, flies are a verb, and the other one it's a noun. And in one case, like is kamo, and the other one is like is ohev, like, yeah. So it's a very clever one. But time flies like an arrow. Time just keeps going, yeah. And seems to be going faster and faster. Amazing. But be that as it may, it's almost Pesach. And as I was preparing for this podcast, what does my preparation for a podcast mean? I put on a tie. I often try to find a tie that fits in with the theme that I'm going to talk about, even though I don't have the theme worked out yet. But I figured it's almost Pesach, which is Chodesh HaAviv, the springtime. So I took up my green tie from Tu B'Shvat, which is, because springtime, everything is green, everything is bright and cheery. Green is a happy color. Yeah. I had a fellow, I've told this story over more than once, I'm sure. I had a fellow over in Or Sameach who had studied industrial psychology. Psychology is, of course, to understand the workings of the mind. Industrial psychology is to figure out how to use that to make money. So that's how we can figure out how to manipulate you. These are the people who study how to set up the supermarket. So the things that you really need, like milk and bread, are all the way in the back. So you have to go through the whole supermarket in order to get them. And the things that go on the bottom shelves, the top shelves, and the things that go at the checkout counter. They spend a lot of time working on that. Because there's this, I don't even know if I can use the term newspaper. I don't even know if I can use the term tabloid. I don't know what word to use for it, the National Enquirer. And that they almost nobody's, there's almost no subscriptions to it. All of them are sold at the checkout counter because you're waiting online and you're looking at it and you go, Trump's an alien? Well, that explains a lot, you know. I mean, there's a picture of him in a flying saucer. I mean, it must be true. You buy it, you know, on impulse, and you get home and you say, I bought the National Enquirer. Like, what is wrong with me? You've been manipulated. So there's a lot of different things that go into it, and one of them is colors. And colors that relax us are blue and green. That's why they say you should make your bedroom blue or green. That's why schools and institutions are usually painted blue and green. They are more relaxing, whereas red and yellow get people excited. That's why the McDonald's, when they designed McDonald's, they made it with red and yellow because those are colors that make people excited and nervous. And so when you get excited and nervous, you eat. And so you order a lot of food. And because the colors are bothering you and overexciting you, you try to get out of there quickly, which is exactly the goal in McDonald's. Come in, order a lot of food, eat it very quickly, and get out. They also tilt the benches slightly forward so that you can't really relax. But okay, the point being that the colors, and that's why the color for go when you're driving is a green light, whereas yellow and red are slow down and stop. So there's a reason for this. The reason for this is that red-yellow represents din. Gold is din, and gold is really a combination of red and yellow. And that's why when we see those colors, we sense danger. Fire is red-yellow. Yeah, that's danger. It's scary. Yeah. And that's din. That's why the sun is red-yellow. It represents din. That's why at the end of time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take the sun, Meinartiko, out of its container, and the heat will destroy the Rishayim, but give light to the tzaddikim, right? Because it's din. And it'll be a world of din, finally, the way it was meant to be when Mashiach comes. Whereas blue-green, as Rashi explains, is tchelis. The tchelis that went on the tzitzis is blue-green. It represents chesed, represents a tchelis, the end of time, tachlis, the tachlis of the universe, where we're going to, the whole purpose of everything. That's blue-green. And so that relaxes us. And that's why most people who picture a relaxing atmosphere, they picture green grass by a blue water. The colors themselves evoke feelings of making people relaxed and comfortable and safe. Yeah, that's what you do. It's tchelis. It's that sense of where we're going to. That's why the sky is blue. The sky is blue, represents the rachamim that surrounds the world and protects us from the sun, which is din. So that's the midas rachamim that's protecting us from the din. So blue-green is relaxing colors. So Chodesh HaAviv, when everything is green and everything is coming back to life, it's a beautiful time. And there's a wonderful feeling of springtime. Springtime, of course, has a feeling of rebirth. And that's, of course, what Geula is. Goy mikerev goy, like a husbandman who pulls the animal, the calf out of the cow, or the foal out of the mare, whatever the case is. You're delivering it. Yeah. The lamb out of the ewe. You're pulling it forward. You're pulling it out. So that's how we were taken out of Mitzrayim. Goy mikerev goy. We were born at Mitzrayim. It's a beginning of rebirth. That's why when you look at nature and you see the whole world coming back to life, that's what springtime is. It's a sense of rebirth and of renewal. And Rashi says, I took you out b'chodesh ha'aviv, which is the best time to travel because the winter is cold. Wow. I did not have a trip in the winter, but I did have a trip in December. Right? I guess that's the winter, technically. It was the end of November, beginning of December. My daughter had surgery on her knee, and we went in to help. And it was 14 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Here in Israel, you say 14 degrees. What's the big deal, 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It was freezing, bitter cold. Yeah. And it's terrible. And it snowed at one point, I had to walk on Shabbos and it was snowy and icy, but that was nothing. They had a lot of snow this year in America. And to have to travel, flights are being canceled, things are driving around, having to get around. I'll never forget when I had to speak in Brooklyn at a Meleva Malka in the snowstorms. And to park in Flatbush under the best of circumstances are difficult. There is no best of circumstances when it comes to parking in Flatbush. And that's why there are many people, they buy a car and they find a good spot and they never drive again. They just leave the car, they come out and visit it every now and then, sit in it, turn on the radio, and then that's it, because just to leave. And that's why when it snows, it's the worst because the snowplow comes and buries your car. So someone comes out and he digs out his car and cleans it all off, and pulls out. And as he pulls out, somebody moves right into his spot. So he goes, gosh, after all that work, I lost my spot. It's a tricky thing. So to have to drive around and park in the snow and flying and the flights getting canceled and all kinds of things, it's difficult. It's difficult. I told this story, I'm sure, before. Rabbi Becher says he was on an El Al flight and they were on the runway and it was snowing heavily. And he says he had gotten bumped up to business class because he flew a lot. And he says he was having a great time. He was up there. They were serving them drinks. They were giving this. That was fine. But in the back, coach, people were going crazy, stuck here and on the ground and what's happening, isn't that? So finally the captain gets on and he says, they say you want to hear my voice. There's a lot of snow. That's it. That was his announcement. Of course, what it meant is that you can't take off until the snow comes, etc. LL pilots are much more taciturn than other pilots. Seinfeld used to do a routine, he'd say, pilot comes on, he goes, this is Captain Williams. We're going to be taking off today towards the northeast. I'm going to bring it up to about 10,000 feet. And then I'm going to turn to the east. We're going to bring it up to about 30,000 feet. That'll be our final cruising altitude. We'll be having this kind of course, And I'm like, hey, just get us to whatever it says on the ticket, I don't really care how you do it. You don't have to share the whole process with me. I'm not telling you what I'm doing. I'm not knocking on the door saying, now I'm eating the peanuts. But so there's a lot of snow. So you travel during the snow. When you travel in the heat, goodness, I spoke in Phoenix twice. It must have been such a big hit, they never invited me back, because the bigger hit that I am, the less chance it is that I'll ever get invited back. One time was in November, one time was in December, one time was in January. It was delightful. But they told me, you come here in July or August, it says people drive with oven mitts because you get into your car and it's so hot you can't even hold the handle. You have to travel in that kind of blazing heat. Very difficult to travel in the summer. Now, again, if you're in a nice air-conditioned vehicle, it's not so bad. But back then, you traveled on foot. And when it's hot and it's blazing like that, and you're schwitzing, I try to walk for my health. And I go out there, I put on my walking outfit, I put on my sneakers, put on one of my T-shirts that I have, and I go out walking. Usually take some music along, and especially in the summer when it's hot, it's really difficult. And I'm walking and I'm pushing myself because I know I have to, and I'm passing all these people who are walking because they have to. I always think, wow, it reminds me there was a TV show called Survivor where people would be dropped onto this, island that they'd have to survive. And there are people who live there, and they must be looking at these Americans thinking, you're coming to survive where I live, on a regular basis. It's like take a bunch of Africans and drop them in Flatbush and see how they do. I just don't know which takeout place to go to. There are so many. But Flatbush Survivor. But when you travel in the springtime, that's the best. Yeah, it's not too hot. It's not too cold. Yeah, it's a wonderful traveling time. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out b'chodesh ha'aviv, davka in the springtime, when it's a good time to travel. And as we enter Chodesh Nisan, Chodesh Aviv, and we think about this chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us, then of course we will realize that chesed is a theme. What do we start off by doing on Nisan? Of course, we make birchas ha'ilonos. Yeah, got my green tie from Tu B'Shvat. Yeah, we look for the flowering fruit trees in order to make a bracha on them, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is creating the fruit, and the fruit trees are going to grow, and there's going to be the flowers, and it's flowering, and it's beautiful, and it smells nice, and it's going to produce the fruit, and all of the chesed that's associated with it. It was not uncommon to see Avigdor Miller Zatzal standing on on the street surrounded by Talmidim. And if you went in, you'd see that he had apple seeds in his hand. And he was describing how if you can look at this apple seed, you have the potential of making an apple tree and hundreds of apples. And the apples are sweet and they taste good and they're color-coded so you know when they're ripe to eat and all the things that go along with it. All the chasodim that are associated with that. We start off. We come to Pesach and we start counting Sfiras HaOmer. And the 7 weeks of Sfiras HaOmer correspond to the 7 lower spheres going down. The first week is Chesed, the second week is Gvura, third week is Tiferes, and then Netzach, and then Hod, and then Yesod, and then Malchus, going down that way. But the first week is Chesed. Yeah. Why? Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim as a Chesed. We were not roy to be saved. The proof is that when we come to the Yam Suf and Hashem tells the Yam Suf to drown the Egyptians, he says, well, why don't I drown these people too? They're not much better than the Egyptians are. Kind of depressing thought, I always thought that the Red Sea would be our friend, but it apparently is not. Yeah, so it wanted to drown us too. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes us out as Chesed. And so in the week of Chesed, we have most of Pesach, culminating with Kriyas Yam Suf. Yeah, it's a Chesed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out as a Chesed. We've mentioned this beforehand. The mazel for the month of Nisan is Tleh, which is a sheep. Yeah, Aries. I was going to say in English, but it's not in English. It's Latin, I think. Yeah, the sheep. I think in English, actually, Aries is a ram. So, but we look at it as a sheep. Why? Because a sheep is helpless. A sheep has to be taken care of. I don't know much about shepherding myself. At one point, that was a pretty popular profession among Jews, but today, You almost never meet a shepherd. I've met a Jewish shepherd, but it's unusual. Most people who go for career counseling are usually put into high tech. They don't say, we've read through all of your, your qualifications, and we think that you'd be a good shepherd. Yeah. Really? Yeah. I wouldn't have thought to go into shepherding. I wasn't the profession I was heading towards yet. But so I don't know much about it, but I remember years ago, as I read classic novels, as my bathroom reading, to continue my my education, or actually that is my education. Yeah. I only took 4 college courses. And after that, I said, wow, anyone who could do this for 4 years, I am so impressed. I couldn't. But I do read a lot, when I'm in the bathroom. So I try to keep up on science and politics and literature. So I read classic novels. Right now I'm doing War and Peace, which is about 12,000 pages, and it doesn't matter how much you read, you're really barely making a dent in it, But it is very well written, I suppose, because I'm reading a translation. I'm not reading in the original Russian, but I tried to read Hardy, and one of his works that was considered a classic was Far from the Maddening Crowd. And there's a character there who's a shepherd. And he has this scene where in the winter, the sheep give birth, and you have to take the lamb and bring it into the little hut where you have the fire in order to warm it up, because otherwise it will die from exposure. Sheep are pretty fragile. Yeah. And there's another scene where the sheep get into the clover and they eat it, and they become so gassy that they just die from the gas inside of them. And there's a way to puncture their stomach to be able to release the gas, and you have to make sure that they don't go into clover. Something I wasn't really aware of. And they were dying, and they're very fragile creatures. It's very hard to be a shepherd. And take care of them. It's very intensive to watch these things. And they don't do anything for you. Oxen, they plow, they pull carts, they work. Yeah. Work like an ox. No one ever said you work like a sheep. Yeah. They say you're helpless like a sheep. You go to the slaughter like a sheep. Yeah. But sheep don't really produce anything in the form of labor, and it takes a lot to take care of them. That's the month of Nisan. When we came out of Mitzrayim, we were like sheep. We were helpless. We had to be taken care of every step of the way. That's what Yetzias Mitzrayim was. We were very fragile. Then you go into the month of Iyar. Iyar is the shore, right? We call it the shore, the ox. In the secular world, they call it Taurus, the bull. But you get the idea. It has to work, has to pull, it has to plow. We have to then start working in Surah Sa'imah to be able to accomplish what we have to accomplish to get ready for Har Sinai. But Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're like a sheep. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing chesed for us. And he takes us out with the Anani HaKavod, the clouds of glory surrounding us to protect us from the heat and the cold. And it pressed and washed our clothing. Yeah. So that was tremendous chesed. And at night he sent the, Amud Eish, the pillar of fire, to lead us and to give us light and take care of us. It was chesed on top of chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us. And of course, at Kriyas Yamsuf, so there was fruit growing. There was a stream of fresh water going along with us. Chesed and chesed and chesed. Yeah. And that's a major theme of Pesach. And that's really what I wanted to talk about. Now, it could be I talked about this years ago. Hopefully, I'll give it a slightly different twist. I remember one year I was in a shir by Moshe Shapiro. It was on Isru Chag after Shavuos. And he had given the same shir, I thought, a few years before when Isru Chag came out, after Shavuos also. And I said to Yosef Brown, Rabbi Yosef Brown, who was a real Talmud of Rabbi Moshe Shapiro, I was not. I had the schus to go to Shiurim, and I had the schus to have to be able to go and speak with him and seek Eitzah, but neither one of us would have called me a Talmud. So I said to Ray Brown, he said the same thing a few years ago. He says, no, he didn't. Last time he was coming at it from this point of view. Now he's coming at it from this point of view. And he explained it was a nuanced difference. And I said, okay, but it's similar. And he said to me a yesod that I've thought about a lot of times. And he says, a painter's palette has only so many colors on it, but he can produce an infinite amount of paintings. And I thought, that is so brilliant, right? If you like a particular musical artist, then you know that a lot of their songs sound the same. I'm thinking here more in the secular world, but in the Jewish world too, right? If you are a fan of Miami Boys Choir, for example, a lot of the songs sound alike because it's a style, obviously. If you have an author, a lot of his works are going to sound alike. So if you like that particular one, everything else is going to be a variation on it. It's going to be a different way approach. And so therefore, if you do a Sfas Emes on any parsha, there's going to be a certain feel to it where you can feel, it has a Sfas Emes feel to it, or a Shem Shmuel, or a Reb Chaim. Yeah, there's a certain feel that it has to it, a certain way that you do it. So everybody has a certain particular style. Rabbi Dr. Avram Tursky said once that I forgot how many books he had written at the time. The number kept changing. I've written this number of books, but I really only wrote one book, 35 times. Because every book is the same yesod, self-esteem. Yeah. And so I looked at it from this point of view, that point of view. I looked at it like this, I looked at it like that. There were all kinds of different variations on the theme, but it basically kept the same basic theme. The Ogedal Yahu, I'm thinking, so a lot of things are going to be like that. So a lot of the things that I say are of a similar theme, but I try to come at it from different point of view. So it could be that I did mention this when I was doing my Pesach program some years ago. It would have been about 6 years ago when I did that. But this is an important idea. And it's something that hit me one year at the Seder. And I share it with you now. Dayenu. Yeah. We all know Dayenu. There are 15 Dayenus. Just as there are 15 steps in the Seder. Kadesh, Urachatz, Kaparas, Yachatz, right? 15 steps in the Beis Hamikdash. A lot of the 15s, and we spoke about that other times. But Ilu Hotzianu Mitzrayim v'lo asa behem shvatim dayenu. That would have been enough. Ilu asa behem shvatim v'lo asa beloheim. If you would have judged them and not judged their gods, dayenu. Ilu asa belohim v'lo harages bechoreihem. You wouldn't have killed their firstborn. That would have been enough. And so it continues. Yeah. But some of these are hard to understand. If you would have split the sea and not taken us through in dry land, that would have been enough. Would it, though? If you're plodding around in the mud, sinking into your knees in a wet seabed, would that have been enough? Would we have gotten away from Mitzrayim, who were coming with chariots and horses? If you would have taken care of us there in the Yam Suf, Dayenu, and you wouldn't have taken care of us in the midbar for 40 years, that would have been enough. Would it though? Because I like to think that the Anani Kavod, keeping us from dying of the heat, was somewhat important. I would also think that, the man and the be'er that you provided for us would have been important for 40 years because we would have starved to death or die of thirst. So how could you say that's not important? If you would have brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah, really? You would have brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah? Well, that doesn't seem like that would have been enough. Dayenu? Okay, that's question number one. Question number two is, after we finish all the Dayenus, it was so much fun, we do it again. Achas kama v'kama tov kfula mechupelas makam aleinu shahotzianu mimitzrayim v'asu em shvatim v'azu v'eleheim v'haragis b'chareim v'nosin v'amonim v'karalano es hayam, etc. We just say Dayenu again without the Dayenus. And we just do all the 15 things once again in the same level. So what are we saying over here? What's the concept of Dayenu? So I wanted to say, Dayenu is coming to tell us a very important thing. Pesach, the Chazal explain, is the source of all Golus and Geula. Meaning, we know there are Dalit Golias, and they were alluded to at creation. Is a reference to the four Golias. By the Brisbane of Asarim, as another reference to the four Golias. They pop up in a lot of different places. The four Golias, the four exiles that the Jewish people will have to go through. Bavel, Paras and Madai, Yavan, and Edom, right? So Babylonia, Persia, and Madai, sometimes they counted separate, sometimes together. Yavan, the Greeks, and Edom, Rome, which is the one that we're still in now. And the four Goliaths that we'll go through, etc. Mitzrayim is the source for all of those. And that is the source where we understand everything that goes into every other Golus and every other exile and redemption that we're going to go through. And we learn it all out from there. And it had within it all of the chasodim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to do for us. And we go through each one of these individually and say, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have done this for us, Dayenu, that would have been enough for us to make a yontif. Not that that would have been enough for us to have survived. Doesn't make a difference. That would have been enough for us to have established a yontif to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That would have been enough to make a holiday, and there is such a holiday. It is what the Aruch HaShulchan refers to as the Yom HaMiyuchas. Because, as you know, when we come to Rosh Chodesh Sivan, we do not say Tachlon for about the first 2 weeks, depending if you're in Chutz La'aretz or not, about the first 2 weeks. The first day you don't say Tachlon because it's Rosh Chodesh. The third and fourth and fifth of the month you don't say Tachlon because it's the Shlosh Yemei HaGebola, the 3 days where we were preparing for Matan Torah. The sixth day you don't say Tachlon because it's Shavuos. And the next 6 days in Eretz Yisrael or 7 days in Chutz La'aretz, you don't say Tachlon because they are the days when you could bring the Korban Chagiga after Shavuos. You have Tashlumim to be able to make it up during that period of time. But what about the second? Why don't you say Tachlon on Beis Sivan? So there are those who say because it is a sandwich day. And there's a din that if you don't say Tachnun on Aleph, and you don't say Tachnun on Gimel, you don't say Tachnun on Beis because it's a sandwich day. It's in between. And that's why you get off on a technicality. The Aruch HaShulchan says no, because Beis Sivan is a holiday. It's called Yom HaMeyuchas, the day when Hashem said to us, I'm going to make you an Am Segula, I'm going to make you my chosen people, and a nation of Kohanim, and a special, I'm choosing you. That was the day of choosing. That was a chesed all by itself, and says the Aruch HaShulchan, therefore it deserves its own holiday. There are halachic nafkaminas by whether or not you're allowed to fast and things like that, but forget about that for now. Yeah. The point is that ilu kirvenu lifnei har Sinai v'lo nasan lanu es haTorah, we would have made a holiday out of that, just from the fact that you brought us to Har Sinai and told us, the experience itself. That would have been enough to be able to make a yontif out of it. Ilu nasan lo es haTorah. Well, we would have made a holiday out of that. In fact, we did. It's called Shavuos. Ilu sipek tzarkenu bamidba arbayim shana. If you would have taken care of our needs in the desert for 40 years, we would have made a holiday out of it. In fact, we did. It's called Sukkos. And that's why on Sukkos, not only do we go into a sukkah to remind us of the Ananei HaKavod that HaKadosh Baruch Hu surrounded us with for 40 years to be able to provide us with protection. It's brought down that there is a minhag on Sukkos to eat fine foods and drink fine wines as a remembrance of the mun and the be'er that we ate and drank in the desert, to remind us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took care of us. So Sukkot is that holiday of Tzarkenu Bamidbar Arbayim Shana, that you provided for us. And so to everything else, we have for splitting the Red Sea, that's Shvi Shal Pesach, right? The seventh day of Pesach. Every one of these things would have been enough all by itself to be able to make a yontif. And that's what Dayenu is saying. And when we finish it, we say, now, look at what you did for us on Pesach. You took us out of Egypt, and you judged the Egyptians, and you destroyed their gods, and you split the sea, and you took us through on dry land, right? Because if we had to slog through the mud, we would have managed, I suppose. But the fact that you made it dry land, made an extra thing for us. Yeah, and you gave us the mun, and you took care of us in the desert, and you gave us the Ananei HaKavod, and you gave us the Torah, and you brought us into Eretz Yisrael, and you gave us the Beis HaMikdash. All of that is wrapped up. Kama tovos mechupalos, not just doubled, but exponential chasodim that you did for us. By the Hasidim, they do a little play on the word Nisan. They don't call it Chodesh Nisan, they call it Chodesh Nisim, the miracles. And the miracles were chasodim on top of chasodim on top of chasodim. And that's why it's the month of the Tleh, of the sheep, because we just stood there and took it all in. We were recipients of chesed. Yes, we had to do something. We had to bring the Korban Pesach, and we had to put the dam on, and we had to have bris milah. We had to, but we were not ready to get the Torah. We were not ready to become the Am HaNivchar. It was a process, 15 steps that we had to take in order to be able to get there. But we start off by looking at all of the chasodim, and the more that we look at all of those chasodim, then that's what Pesach is all about. What a tragedy that Pesach has turned into a kvetch. Now, it's a lot of work. It's definitely a lot of work. When I was a kid, my parents worked, and very often Pesach came out around another secular holiday, Christian holiday, Easter, which was a very busy time in the flour business. And so I had to make Pesach. I did the cleaning and the schlepping, and I had to bring the things from the Pesach closet downstairs. And then I had to clean everything out and rearrange things, set everything up. It's a lot of work. Not as much work as afterwards. Shmini Shel Pesach. Afterwards, my father would have some matzah and butter. What he would have, maybe some herring, have a cup of coffee. And then he'd say, okay, I'm going to sleep. In the morning, I'm having chametz. You better make sure everything's put away. And I'd be up all night, transfer things over. And I learned there about the key to changing over. And that is, it takes a little advanced planning going into the last days of Pesach, which my mother did not do. So the refrigerator was filled with pots and bowls and this, etc. And so we, as we go into Shvi Shel Pesach, we don't have a Shmini Shel Pesach. Shvi Shel Pesach, we start already transferring things over into aluminum pans and washing out the Pesach pots that we're not going to need anymore. And we start, packing up the stuff that we're not going to need, and putting things ready. And we start anticipating for that cleaning and transferring over. Because, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln, a home cannot live half chametz and half Pesach. Yeah. You have to make that transition over as quickly as possible, and that's why when we do the making everything Pesach, you have to work in zones. You slowly start closing in until you have just the kitchen left, and then you have to do it all in like 2 days, and you gotta put the pedal to the metal and make sure that everything is taken care of. Because otherwise, if you have half of it like this, I'm always amazed at people who say to me, yeah, the first thing I do is I do my kitchen and then I can start baking and cooking. And I'm like, you mean your whole house is chametz and your kitchen is pesach and you're not worried that anyone's going to walk in there with something? And yikes. Yeah, it's a little frightening. But we have to do it over. But so you see a lot of people start dreading Pesach. Yeah. Oh no, it's almost Pesach. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? I never had that experience when I was growing up, and I didn't get that from my parents. Okay, granted, they had me taking care of everything, but when they used to do it themselves, that generation, nobody said, "Oh no, I can't make Pesach." Everybody made Pesach. I talked about my in-laws. My in-laws would erev Pesach in the morning. They would have bagels on the kitchen table. And then they would clean it up, take it out, bring it out to Sreifas chametz, and then, cover over the table, change over some things, and then start cooking, I knew people who used to just clean their house. Okay, they were bachrim, but they would just clean their apartment that they had Erev Pesach, in time for B'dikas chametz. He says because they had a rule that you could only eat in the kitchen or the dining room, and nobody brought any chametz into their bedrooms, and so they did a quick once over, and then they cleaned over whatever and covered the counters, and boom, they did it in a couple of hours. And I know people who have a Pesach kitchen, yeah, so forget about it. They just close everything up, So, but there's a sense of dread. Oh, it's Pesach. I love Pesach. I love it. I always did. I mentioned already we're going away to a hotel this year, Nov Kinneret. I just feel like the whole matzav in Eretz Yisrael has been so difficult. My kids have been really rallying for this. And I mentioned, by the way, anyone who wants to go, we'll hang out together over Pesach because I don't have much to do. And like I say, if it actually goes, then I'll try to make Pesach program the way that I always wanted. We'll see. And this is a trial run for everybody else. I'm putting myself out there. But if anyone wants to come for the beta version, the trial run, yeah, you're welcome to come along. But in any event, to me, I would plan out the calendar. I would plan out where the shopping would take place, where this would go, where I'm going now, what I'm doing with this. And so, like, one of the first things I would do is the back room, so that when I would do all the shopping, I'd put everything there. And the other thing I would do is I would do the other freezer. I have a second freezer. So I clean that out so that if I have any frozen stuff, I get my chickens and my meat and I can stick them in there. And I can do that. And I love Pesach shopping. I love going around and looking at the products and seeing what I'm going to get and spending millions of dollars on things that should not cost that much during the year. But hey, it's Pesach. And, getting my matzahs and that. I find the whole thing so exciting and so much fun. I remember it. I always have such fond memories. I don't know why people have this fear. Instead of looking at all the chasodim that are there. So, Pesach is a time of chesed. Nisan is a time of chesed. This is a month, a Chodesh Aviv. The whole month is a chesed. And the more we focus on that, then the more hopefully we can enjoy the whole Nisan Pesach experience. Springtime, everything comes to life. And what a beautiful time it is of chesed for everyone. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. And the first question is by Anonymous. What do women bring with them into Olam Haba? I hear a lot about how men bring their Torah that they learned with them into Olam Haba, but nothing for women. What about single women who don't get their husband's Torah? This is a poignant question. Poignant. Because the Gemara says that it's in the schus of Torah that we get to Olam Haba. So how do women get there? By supporting their husbands and children in their learning of Torah. Well, what about a woman who doesn't get married? Doesn't have a husband, doesn't have children. Yeah. What do they do? And it is a poignant question. I would say painful. Painful. And it's the kind of thing that those of us in the field always try to wish away because we just don't like the implications of those kind of questions. But it is an important question. And that's why, I've given a lot of ladies shurim over the years, and I always say that a lot of the Torah is being presented for men, and women are sort of an add-on. And that's why I have a Hanukkah shir and a Purim shir and Pesach shir where I try to focus on the women more. And I think that they have to understand what their avoda is. Yeah, how many women have felt like Simchas Torah is me standing and watching the men dance with the Torah? So how exciting is that for me? Yeah, and I understand that. So I want to bring an example of a woman who did not support her husband learning Torah because she was divorced and never had any children. Her name was Sarah Schneer. I'm pretty sure she got into Olam Haba because she was mechazek Torah. And everybody has the power to be mechazek Torah in the world. However I do that. So if I do it by supporting a husband or by children, that's wonderful. But if I don't have husbands and children and I find another way to be mechazek Torah, so look at what Sarah Schneer did. She found the opportunity for people who are learning Torah to get married. It's a very interesting thing. There was a generation, for example, of people who were pretty frum, and they married women who were not so frum. Women who did not cover their hair or other things like that. Why? They were lucky to find someone to get married. without getting into the issue, just the story, the fellow who was driving Rav Soloveitchik to give the first Gemara shir in Stern College for women said, Rebbe, why are you doing this? And he said, because girls don't want to marry boys in learning because they're not machshav Torah. I want them to see what Torah is so they can appreciate what their husbands are doing. That's how the women learning Gemara approach those who quote Rav Soloveitchik came from. He wanted them to be able to find people who wanted to marry B'nai Torah. So Shnira created a movement of people who wanted to marry people who were going to sit and learn Torah. Is that not the greatest machazek of Torah that you can possibly imagine? If Ben Torah wants to sit and learn, he has to find somebody who's willing to do that. Today, it's considered the norm to marry a boy who's going to learn Torah, as opposed to the exception. Back then, you had to find some crazy girl who was going to be willing to marry a guy who was going to be sitting and learning. And Sarah Shnira changed that around. She did not support her husband or her children. She did it by supporting Torah in the world. And everybody has the ability to be able to do that. And it's very interesting. Rav Henich Leibowitz, his father, Rabbi Dovid, started Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. And he started with the idea of learning Torah like they did in Europe. Not some quickie, 2-year smicha program, but to actually sit and learn the European style. Ad Kedei Kach, Rabbi Chaitz said that we were the only people who were allowed to be recognized. Our smicha was recognized by the Agudas Rabbanan. They would only give smicha at that time to people who got their smicha in Europe. They said, American, it's a joke, the yeshivas here. And Reb David said, test my boys like you would a European yeshiva boy. So he's doing it on this level. Well, he set up a board, and he built it. He built the yeshiva with the money he had put aside to buy himself land in Eretz Yisrael, because he always wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. And he took that money to start the yeshiva. And the board, which did not give the money to start the yeshiva, decided to vote him out of his own yeshiva. So there was a rule that you were allowed to have an open board that other people could join without having to be approved. So there was this one Jewish school teacher, and she said she's going to bring down all the teachers from the school, and all the lady teachers came down to the board meeting. And when it came time for the vote to vote him out, so they said, Rabbi, now? Yeah. Says everyone opposed, and all of the teachers raised their hand and voted to return the control of the yeshiva back to Rav David. And he never had a board again. But look at these women. They saved the yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. They saved everything that Rav David was doing, and his son Reb Chenuch, and everything that Chavetz Chaim did around the world all came about in the schus of these ladies. You think they were in Kona Olam Haba with that, to be mechazek Torah? So everybody can be mechazek Torah in some way. I remember many years ago, I was invited to speak in the yeshiva of South Shore. Today it's called the Teres Yaakov, the Sifta Teres Yaakov at the time. And Rabbi Baruch Rabinowitz was there. And he had me speak at a special Friday thing, Kennis, and they would serve potato kugel on Fridays. Very good potato kugel. And I said, where's the potato kugel come from? And he says, there's a woman whose son is in yeshiva, and she can't afford to pay tuition. So we gave a full scholarship. And she says, but I want to do something to help the yeshiva. So every Friday, she would bake potato kugels and send them into the yeshiva for the boys. Now, could you imagine people come by the yeshiva and they bring the boys cake, or they bring them this, or they help out in some way? When I was in Chavetz Chaim in 1975, we were on Rehov Sanhedrin Sheish, and next door there was this Svardisha lady, and they used to call her Geveret Mami, and she used to wash the boys' clothes. everybody would bring their clothes to her. She'd charge them a nominal fee. And everyone called the Geveret Mommy. She would wash and fold everybody's clothes and bring them back and ask everybody about them. That was her way of being Mechazek Torah. So it's nice if you can support your husband and support your children. But if not, then it's up to you to find out how I can be Mechazek Torah in the world. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com, and you can leave a comment. You can ask a question. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim, Tefillah, the ladies' Masil Shasharm, the men's Daf Yomi. And we are in the process of how to answer questions. We have gotten a lot of response, and we just have to figure out technically how to put that all together, but I hope to start that after Pesach. And you can sponsor an episode, sponsor a question and answer, sponsor a parsha in 5. And that's it for now. Until next week, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again, it's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.